Alright, welcome back to lesson 3. Your maze is functional. Your player can move, and you've got glowing orbs to collect. But let's be real, your game still feels a little empty. Today, we're fixing that by adding two things every game needs: a clear goal, an exit to finish the game, and player feedback, a UI that tracks time and shows how many orbs you've collected. So the next thing we're going to do is create an exit zone. This will notify the game manager when the player reaches the exit. So we're going to go to the exit area, you're going to right click in the hierarchy, go to 3D object, and select cube. You could rename this exit or something similar. The next thing we do is select the cube, the exit, and in the box collider that came with the cube, mark it as is trigger. This will take off collision and we can use this as a trigger event. We're going to adjust the position so it's on the ground, so in the y-axis just adjust it to 1, and then we're going to adjust the scale to make it large enough so the player can walk into it easily. After that, we will also turn off the mesh renderer. This will remove the skin of the object, making it transparent. Now that that's complete, we're going to create a new script called exit. This will be the logic for the exit zone. Double click it, open up Visual Studio. So now we're in the exit script. First thing we're going to do is delete the code that's in there, the functions that are already in there, and we're going to start typing void on trigger enter, parentheses, collider, other, parentheses, then hit enter and do the squiggly brackets. We're going to do an if statement, if parentheses other dot compare tag. So we're going to start looking for if the player collides with it. So inside the compare tag, we're going to type player, and then for the if statement, we're going to write a message just to help us log it at first for testing. So debug.log, and then inside the statement, we want to write level complete. So save your script and head back to the Unity editor. Next, we're going to bring the player controller or the player over to this area so we don't have to run through the maze every single time. So all you have to do is go to the hierarchy, select the player, hit Control Shift F. This will spawn the character in wherever the camera location was. Adjust the rotation so he's facing straight or it's facing straight, and we'll position it towards the exit. Once we head back to the Unity editor, make sure you select the exit script that we just wrote and drag it onto the exit object in the hierarchy. Put it in the inspector panel though. Make sure it's on the right side in the inspector panel. Now we'll press play and see what happens when we hit the exit. And as you can see in the lower left hand corner, level complete was printed. So the script works so far. The basic version of it. Next, we're going to get started on the UI or the HUD. This will be for tracking the timer and how many orbs we collect. So in the hierarchy, let's right click, select UI, and then canvas. On the right side, we're going to select the UI scale mode and switch it to scale with screen size. And an easy 1920 by 1080 is a good ratio to use. We're going to select the canvas, right click, and go to UI and select Text Mesh Pro. It might ask you or prompt you to do an install of some assets needed. Just hit yes. So we will rename this text orb counter, and this will track how many orbs we collect out of overall orb. Inside the text box, we'll type orbs : 0 out of 15. You can change the color to whatever you want. Now we're going to open up the game manager that we created earlier, and we're going to add some new data or new lines of code. So inside the game manager, we're going to write private float elapsed time equals 0. And then under that, we're going to write private bool, which is boolean, which stands for a true or false value, is timer running equals true, colon, or semicolon, I mean. Now we're going to write some more logic underneath awake. So we're going to write private void update, and then inside that, we're going to write if is timer running. So is the timer active right now? If it is, then we're going to run what's inside the if statement. Elapsed time plus equals time dot delta time semicolon. Then under that, we're going to write UI manager dot instance dot update timer parentheses elapsed time semicolon. And we haven't created the UI manager yet, but we will. So we have some logic for the collected orbs, but we're going to add a little bit more to it. So inside collect orbs, we're going to write UI manager dot instance dot update orb counter parentheses collected orbs, comma, total orbs. These are two input values. So we're going to input how many orbs we collected and the total amount of orbs that we're available to collect. So then under that, we're going to write another if statement, and in that is going to be if collected orbs is greater than or equal to total orbs. If it is, end game. That is another win scenario that we're including. If you collect all the orbs, then you can end the game early. Under that, we're going to write an end game method. So we're going to write public void end game. Then under that, inside the curly brackets, is timer running equals false, semicolon, and then we're going to write a log to check it. Debug.log, and inside write game over time colon elapsed time colon F2. And then under that, we're going to write UI manager dot instance dot show end screen elapsed time collected orbs total orbs. These are the 3 input values. But in the future, we're actually not going to use this statement. I changed it later on to, instead of using a whole new end screen, we have a pop-up UI. But that'll be updated in the future. I kept logic like that in because that is how game dev works with iteration. Sometimes you plan on doing one way, and then as you progress, you decide you're going to do it a different way, or things don't work out, or you think of a simpler thing that you can cut corners to save on scope or reduce scope. Now we're back into the UI editor, and let's adjust the location of the orbs counter just so it's not right in the middle of the screen, because that's not very practical. So inside the orbs counter object in the inspector on the top left, there is an anchor option. So we're going to click it and hit Alt, and then click the top right anchor point, and that will anchor it to the top right of the screen. And then we can adjust the position slightly based on how far in the corner it is. Give it a little buffer. You will want to adjust the Y position. I'm going to go back into the canvas, select UI, and we're going to add another text. This is going to be for the timer, and that will be placed in the top left corner. So you can rename it timer text. We're going to do a pretty similar setup to the orbs collector. So again, we're going to position it to the top left now, click the anchor point, click Alt, and then move it over, and then adjust the Y position down a little bit. For the text, we're going to default it as time colon 0.00. We'll leave the color white, it doesn't really matter, you can adjust it whatever you feel. Now we're going to create a new script for this. So go back to your scripts folder, right click, and create a new C# script. We're going to name it UI Manager. So inside the UI Manager, first thing we're going to write is public static UI Manager instance. So an instance basically is, this makes the UI Manager accessible from anywhere in the game. Underneath that, we're going to write public text mesh pro u GUI or GUI, and then orb counter text semicolon. This is a reference to the orb counter text. And then under that, we're going to write public text mesh pro u GUI or GUI timer text, which is a reference to the timer text. And then under that, we write private void awake, and we write instance equals this, and this initializes the singleton instance, and that is all we'll need for awake. Under that, we're going to write public void update orb counter, and inside the inputs we'll put int collected comma int total. Inside these squiggly brackets, we're going to write orb counter text dot text equals $ quotes orbs colon squiggly brackets collected squiggly brackets slash total in squiggly brackets quotes, and end with a semicolon. And this updates to orb counter UI. Under that, we're going to write public void show end screen, and the inputs are going to be float time, int collected, and int total. And inside their squiggly brackets, we're going to write a log. Log's the end screen for testing. So you can write debug.log, $ quotes, inside write game over, time is, it will display a time value, then time colon F2, and then orbs, and it'll display the orbs value. So write one more thing, and that is for the timer. So we have to write public void update timer, and the input is going to be float time. And then inside that, we're going to write timer text dot text equals $ quotes time colon, and then in the squiggly brackets, we're going to write time colon F2, and this updates the timer UI. So make sure you save your script, and it looks like we have a error. We're using Text Mesh Pro elements, but we forgot to include the reference to that, forgot to include it in the heading. So above that, at the top under Unity Engine, we're going to have to include something. We're going to write using TMPRO, and this will give us access to the Text Mesh Pro elements. Okay, so this error was just a mess up with Unity. So all I had to do was close out of the editor and reopen it, and the errors went away. You might not get these errors. So before we finish up the UI elements, we're gonna create a new scene. This will be the main menu scene. We'll use this later on in the game. Came to mind and I felt it was a good time to add it. In the scene folder, right click, select create and select scene and rename it start menu and then save. And we'll get back to this later. You don't have to worry about it now. So now we're gonna go back to the canvas and finish that. So next thing we do is select the canvas and drag the UI manager into it. We have to identify, or we have to put some inputs in that we created. First one is for orb counter text. We have to tell Unity what objects, what elements in the hierarchy are we talking about, are we trying to display. So we drag in orb counter object that we have under the canvas into the orb counter text input, and then the same thing for the timer text object in the canvas into the timer text of the script in the UI manager. So our orb has our script on it, so we'll see if this works. So we walk towards the orb and it's collected, and not only is it collected, the orb gets destroyed, like we said, and the orb's counter on the top right has updated at each orb we collect. And if you notice on the top left, the timer is running. So those UI elements are working. When we find our way to the end of the level, if you notice, we cross the exit zone, we get a message that reads level complete still. So that still works. And that's lesson 3. You've added an exit, built a UI to track progress, and tied everything together in the game manager. Your game now feels almost complete. Players have goals, feedback, and a way to finish. In the next lesson, we'll polish it even further. Let's keep this momentum going. See you next time.